The first snow of December had just settled when the family decided it was finally time to bring out their holiday decorations. Boxes stored in the attic for months were carried down, each one filled with strands of lights, glowing reindeer, and inflatable snowmen. The house slowly transformed into a warm beacon on the cold suburban street. Twinkling lights traced the roofline, wreaths hung proudly on the windows, and a glowing Merry Christmas sign shone from the yard. At night, the display came alive, casting soft colors onto the snow and filling the air with the unmistakable feeling of the season. Neighbors passing by slowed their cars to admire the effort. Children tugged at their parents' hands, pointing at the reindeer and Santa sleigh that seemed ready for flight. Even those who weren't particularly fond of decorations smiled at the sight. It wasn't just about lights, it was about the sense of community they created. For many on the block, it marked the true beginning of the holidays. But not everyone shared in that joy. Just a few houses away, a woman watched with narrowed eyes and arms crossed. She had a reputation for disapproval, a presence that seemed to hover over the neighborhood like a storm cloud. The more the lights glowed, the deeper her scowl grew. She muttered to herself about rules, regulations, and what she saw as disturbances. For her, every small joy that others found seemed to be an inconvenience to a perfect vision of control. As the days passed, the display grew brighter. New elements were added. Candy cane stakes lined the walkway, icicle lights draped from the porch, and a carefully placed nativity scene stood illuminated near the center of the yard. The music box playing soft carol could be heard faintly in the evenings, blending with the laughter of children enjoying the sight. The house had become a landmark on the street, something that made passers-by pause and feel a spark of holiday spirit. This only made her bitterness worse. Each evening, while others admired the glow, she seethed. The decorations weren't just lights to her, they were an offense. She told herself they were too bright, too loud, and even unsafe. But beneath all her excuses lay a simpler truth. She despised joy when it wasn't hers to control. She decided something had to be done. Grievances to the HOA board hadn't yielded the result she wanted. Her complaints, thinly veiled as concerns, had been brushed aside as petty, but she wasn't ready to let go. She convinced herself the situation was an emergency, something requiring a stronger hand. With that thought guiding her, she reached for her phone and prepared to escalate the matter in the most dramatic way possible. That night, as the light shone brightest and neighbors admired the display, she placed a call that would set everything in motion, a call she was certain would put an end to the holiday cheer once and for all. The call to 911 was made with urgency, as though the glowing lights and soft carols posed a real threat to the peace of the neighborhood. She described them as blinding, disruptive, and unbearable. She spoke with the conviction of someone who believed her word alone should be enough to bring authority down on her neighbors. When she hung up, she stood at her window, arms folded tightly, waiting for the flashing red and blue to arrive. It didn't take long. The sight of a patrol car pulling onto the street drew curious eyes from nearby homes. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open, and neighbors stepped out into the chilly night air to see what was happening. The children, bundled in coats and scarves, pointed excitedly at the squad car, thinking it was just another surprise added to the festivities. The officers inside, however, had come expecting trouble. The dispatcher had described a disturbance complaint, so they prepared themselves for noise, chaos, or even unsafe conditions. When they stepped out of the vehicle, though, the reality of the scene was entirely different. In front of them stretched a cheerful winter wonderland, glowing lights shimmering on the snow, inflatables swaying gently in the breeze, and a group of families standing around, sipping hot chocolate from paper cups. The only noise came from the faint sound of holiday music playing at a level quieter than the chatter of the crowd. The officers paused for a moment, taking in the sight. They exchanged a look, the kind that spoke volumes without words. This was no emergency. This was joy. The woman, however, wasted no time making herself the center of attention. She stormed forward, her finger pointed like a weapon, her voice sharp and piercing as she launched into complaints. She demanded the officers shut everything down immediately, insisting the lights violated rules, that the music disturbed the peace, and that the whole display was nothing short of menace. Her words echoed across the street, but they were met with silence from the families gathered, silence filled with disbelief and a growing sense of impatience. The officers listened politely, jotting down notes, though their expressions remained calm and unreadable. They allowed her to finish a tirade, nodding occasionally as though considering her words. Then they turned their attention to the yard itself. One officer walked around, inspecting the setup carefully. He checked the volume of the music, tested the brightness of the lights from different angles, and noted how all decorations were properly secured and not obstructing sidewalks or streets. The other officer quietly spoke with neighbors, gathering impressions of how the display had affected them. Every account told the same story. People loved it. The lights had become the highlight of the street, a gathering place for joy, and something that made the neighborhood feel more alive than it had in years. No one had been disturbed, not a single neighbor besides the woman. As the officer returned from his inspection, the conclusion became unavoidable. The holiday display wasn't the problem. The problem was the pettiness behind the call. And soon, the entire block would see just how the officers planned to handle it. The officers gathered near the sidewalk, their breath visible in the cold night air. Around them, families stood quietly, waiting for the verdict. The children clutched their cocoa cups and tugged at their mittens, their eyes darting between the glowing decorations and the stern uniforms of authority. For a moment, the entire street seemed to hold its breath. The woman, certain she had won, stood proudly with her arms crossed. She had already begun imagining the officers dismantling the lights, ordering the family to shut everything down, and restoring what she believed was order. Her smug expression only deepened as she tapped her foot, impatient for her victory to unfold. But what came next shattered her confidence. One of the officers stepped forward and addressed the crowd. His words were measured but firm. He explained that after inspecting the decorations and listening to the neighbors, there was no violation of law, no disruption, and no danger. The lights, he stated clearly, were perfectly fine. The party could continue. Relief rippled through the guests as smiles spread and whispers of approval turned into open cheers. Then came the unexpected twist. The officer shifted his attention directly to the woman who had made the call. His voice sharpened as he reminded her that 911 was for emergencies only, not for petty personal disputes. Misusing the system wasted valuable time and resources that could have been needed for real crises. To the astonishment of everyone watching, he produced his notepad, wrote a citation, and handed it to her. She stood frozen, the paper shaking in her hand, her cheeks turning a deep shade of red. The neighbors erupted into applause. Some clapped enthusiastically, others laughed openly, and a few even shouted words of encouragement to the family whose decorations had caused such uproar. Children bounced with joy, their faces lit not only by the glow of the lights but by the triumph they had just witnessed. The holiday spirit, once threatened, now burned brighter than ever. Humiliated, the woman tried to defend herself, but her words faltered under the weight of the officer's warning. She realized she had not only failed to stop the decorations but had turned herself into the spectacle of the evening. The same neighbors she hoped would support her now looked at her with disapproval, shaking their heads at her pettiness. With nowhere left to direct her anger, she retreated quickly, clutching the citation like a scarlet mark of her defeat. As a patrol car pulled away, the atmosphere shifted. What had been a tense standoff turned into a celebration. The family turned the music up just a little louder, neighbors gathered closer, and laughter rang through the crisp night air. Some even went home and returned with their own boxes of decorations, inspired to join in. Soon, houses up and down the street began to glow, as if in defiance of the negativity that had tried to snuff out the joy. The holiday display that started with one family had turned into something much bigger. It became a symbol of unity, resilience, and the simple truth that joy is stronger than bitterness. And though the woman had tried to ruin it, she had only succeeded in making the season brighter for everyone else. On that street, in that moment, Christmas had never felt more alive. Do like, subscribe for more video.